Hello, real progressives. Welcome to another edition of Rocco Million Live. Please share this video on your timeline. Please invite your friends. Give me a minute. I'm going to do the same, and then we will get started right away. Again, thank you everybody for joining me live for another edition of Rocco Million Live on Real Progressives. Settle in. And please share this stream to your timelines, and please invite your friends. Please share this stream to your favorite groups as well. Thank you very much. Give me 1 second and we will start. I'm just going to share this to my timeline. How's everyone doing today? Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another edition of Rocco Million Live. Please share this live stream. Invite your friends. We're about to start momentarily. I'm sharing the live stream with my RP group and with my timeline real quick, and then we will start. Again, one more time, thanks for joining us, everybody, for another edition of Rocco Million Live. All right. Tonight, as a real progressive, we focus on destroying the lies and scare tactics and myths and legends of the mainstream that keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. Okay, that's what we do at Real Progressives, because that's the only way we could unite in solidarity for the public purpose as mandated by our Constitution. So people like me, I'm not an expert. I'm simply a disabled veteran that's trying to participate in our democracy. Okay, because that's the only way democracy works. And the good thing is you don't have to be an expert to understand and learn the simple logic of our actual operational reality. Anybody can understand it. And thank God that you don't have to be an expert to participate in our democracy because many of our orthodox mainstream so-called experts they're not even based in reality. They're not based in science. They're based in ideological fantasy. So our job at Real Progressives is to destroy these lies and scare tactics that were designed to keep us divided and fighting against each other. And, and to make you see that there's another perspective out there, one that actually does make sense, one that is based in logic, one that is based in science. Okay, to ultimately get you to join and follow Real Progressives, to join the revolution, to look up the greats, the great thinkers, the real heterodox experts, people like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, people like Dr. Fidel Kaboub, people like Dr. Stephen Hell, people like Dr. Bill Mitchell, economist Ellis Whittingham, Pavlina Chernova, Warren Mosler, Mike Norman. It goes on and on and on. You look up these real truth tellers, these real experts that aren't afraid to speak truth to power. And you might be asking yourself, well, Rocco, in one breath you tell us, the mainstream experts are bunk. Why should we believe your experts? What makes your experts any better? And the answer is easy. The mainstream orthodox experts aren't based in science. They're based in ideological fantasy that doesn't even make sense. It's not logical. They say things like public debt is somehow a burden on future generations. They say things like 5% of unemployment is really full employment, when that's millions of people forced to be poor and unemployed. That's ideological fantasy. Our experts are based in science. They're based in logic. They're based, scientific fact. Our experts, you can dive into the material and simply apply logic, and you will learn and you will see this is the only way it can work. This is the only way that is even logical. So that's our goal at Real Progressives. And then you learn it and then you teach it. Each one, teach one. Because change is only going to happen from the bottom up, from people like you and me speaking out and interjecting this simple logic everywhere it's needed to destroy the mainstream lies and scare tactics that divide us and keep us fighting against each other instead of uniting in solidarity for a seat at the kitchen table. This is the whole deal. All right. So please take your civic and moral duty seriously to participate in our democracy. So many have sacrificed everything, given their lives, everything else for our rights. Please exercise them. Learn our simple logic of our operational reality so that you can effectively participate in our democracy, so that we can ultimately, collectively force our socially owned government to satisfy its mandate to the general welfare, first and foremost. So, this week, the biggest mainstream scare tactic that I've seen by far is the Russian narrative. And I put some context in the event. I'll share those links in this stream afterwards. But, the Russian narrative, I'm talking about the tactic of hating Trump and red baiting Russia, making people think we need the lesser evil, oppose Trump at all costs because he's somehow different than the rest. Somehow the world is going to end under Trump, and this is the controlled opposition that keeps the right-wing neoliberal duopoly in power. When I say right-wing neoliberal duopoly, I'm talking about both parties. Democrats and Republicans are right-wing neoliberals who put profit over people in society. And the Dem versus Republican divide is simply controlled opposition to keep us fighting against ourselves instead of uniting in forcing our socially owned government to satisfy its public purpose. Controlled opposition, the ruling class uses to protect its private purpose. Okay, so think about this. Ask yourselves, is it any different for our public officials like Trump maybe to be colluding with a foreign power like Russia against government's constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society? Is that different than if our public officials collude with our domestic oligarchy against government's constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society? I mean, how's that different? The problem remains the same in both cases. Our socially owned government is working for the private purpose over its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. That's the problem in either case. It doesn't matter who our socially owned government is working, whose private purposes they're working for. When they subvert the government's constitutional mandate to the public purpose to instead work for the private purpose, that's fascism regardless. So our problem is a fascist right-wing government in both cases. Okay, ask yourself, is it any better than when Democrats work with our domestic oligarchy to privatize the public space? When Democrats work with our domestic oligarchy to abandon government's constitutional mandate to the general welfare by privatizing the public space? What I mean is it better when Democrats work for the domestic oligarchy to make public goods that are essential to the general welfare for profit and private and inefficient and ineffective? Okay, is that any different than Trump working for the private purpose with Russia to subvert democracy and get power? I mean, either way, I'm in shit. Either way, I'm living in squalor. Either way, the majority is having economic and police terror inflicted on them. Okay, whether it's the Democrats and Republicans traditionally working for the domestic capitalist class, making everything from the justice system for profit, energy for profit, healthcare and education for profit, or whether it's Trump working for the private purpose to get power. It's all the same. It's right-wing fascism, putting profit over the people in society. So, and they don't want you to see that. They want you to overlook that reality. They want you to be so scared of Trump and the Russians, the Red Russians and communism, that you overlook the reality that the Democrats are just as right-wing as the Republicans. And so you vote for them. But even if you don't care, after you hear me say all this, you still don't care. Trump is just the evilest piece of shit you've ever seen, and you hate him, you hate him, you hate him. Okay, that's great. But you still have to remember our reality. You still have to deal with the reality. And that reality is Russia didn't get Trump elected. Okay, I don't. If Bernie would have won the nomination for the DNC as he should have, as a populist, Russia could have said whatever they wanted about Bernie. He would have mopped the floor with Trump. So the reality is the DNC got us Trump. They were more concerned with beating Bernie in the progressive wing of their own party than with beating Trump. What's that mean? That means that the DNC was more comfortable with a Trump POTUS than with a Bernie POTUS. Wow. What's that mean? Because really, if they were really that afraid of Trump, the right-wing fascist Trump, then they would have ran the strongest candidate. And that candidate by far was Bernie, who consistently beat Trump in head-to-head matchups. Was the progressive candidate, loved across America. Okay, instead, they ran a hated establishment candidate who couldn't even fill a school gymnasium because they would rather lose to Trump than win with Bernie, people. It's controlled opposition. The right-wing duopoly, both Democrats and Republicans, their main goal is to keep us divided and fighting against each other so we don't unite and force the public purpose as mandated by our Constitution. They are protecting their private purpose agenda at the expense of government's constitutional mandate to the general welfare. And even more proof of that is the DNC fraud lawsuit that followed. Because we saw, the DNC clearly cheated Bernie, blackballed Bernie. And then in a DNC lawsuit that followed, the DNC admitted in open court. They argued. They said they can't be guilty of defrauding Bernie. They can't be guilty of defrauding Bernie donors who donated to Bernie through the DNC because they have a First Amendment right to rig their own primary. And they have no binding obligation to, follow their own corporate charter that, talks about the public purpose and democracy. So they're telling us to our face, and they said this more than once. They doubled down on it, tripled down on it, that their own members, DNC members, us, their own members have no right to democratically choose who wins their own primary. They told us this to our face. And they said if they want, they could go in a back room and pick it over cigars and whiskey like the old days. And that's completely legal. And they tell us this. Okay. And in the same breath, they're hysterical telling us that Trump and the Russians are subverting our democracy. Do you see how hypocritical, how ridiculous this whole argument is? How it's complete bullshit, controlled opposition to make us ignore the real problems. The fact is it's our American oligarchy that already subverted our democracy long before Trump was even elected. Okay, again, they told the DNC come out in open court and told us that they have no obligation to the public purpose. They have no obligation to democracy. Okay, and then they showed us by cheating Bernie and putting in the hated right-wing Hillary, establishment Hillary, that they represent 1% first and foremost. Okay, and they showed us that. And if we're okay with that kind of right-wing fascism, then why even oppose Trump to begin with? We should love the right-wing fascist Trump is, in all honesty. All right, so we have to understand is we can't let them play us like a fiddle like this. All right, we can't let them do this. We got to understand. We got to know their game. We got to learn the simple operational reality so we could destroy their narratives and their lies and scare tactics so we don't accept artificial scarcity, so that we don't fight against each other instead of uniting in solidarity, so that we don't punch down. That's what we got to do. And the next thing that the big lie that I seen that I want to talk about is another one that we always see constantly. And it's one that I pretty much talk about every week, but it needs to be addressed every week because this is a consensus. It doesn't matter if you're watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, everybody on both sides will say that our economy is great right now. Okay? Even Chris Como, watching him the other night, he made it a point to say it over and over again. Our economy is great right now. Trump is the president. He deserves that credit. What the hell are you talking about? That's a bold-faced lie. And they go along with it, the mainstream Democrats and Republicans. And this is what really highlights the big lie. It pinpoints the distinction between New Deal Democrats and the right-wing neoliberal Democrats of today. All right? The fact is, the operational fact is both parties back in the 70s teamed up to kill the full employment policies of the New Deal and usher in this right-wing neoliberal era that we are in today. And this is marked by targeting unemployment and privatizing the public space while deregulating everything. All right. Both parties have been targeting unemployment ever since then. All right. This is not only forces millions to be poor and unemployed, but it gives capital a weapon to wage war on labor with. This weapon, unemployment, drives all labor wages down, all working conditions down. Now the boss don't have to give you a raise. He has millions of unemployed people outside, so desperate that they'll do your job cheaper for starvation wages. It puts downward pressure on all labor wages and working conditions. Okay, this is exactly why our wages have been stagnant from the 70s, while our productivity and our cost of living and corporate profits are at record highs. This is not an accident. It's by design. Our socially owned government is engaged in fascism, class warfare against the majority. Okay, our socially owned government is working for the profits of the 1% over its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. That's why this is wage suppression. That's why this is happening. And so let's get this straight real quick here. And then I'll open this up for questions and comments, and we'll talk about your biggest scare tactics that you ran up against. But we have to get this straight. All right, this is real easy to defeat. Targeting unemployment, first of all, forces millions to be poor and unemployed. Okay, we can't ignore that. If government is targeting 5% unemployment, I don't care if every worker has the best job skills, if every worker has the most motivation to work, if every worker has the most personal responsibility. If our socially owned government targets 5% unemployment, we're going to still be forcing millions to be unemployed and poor. That's just a fact. Personal responsibility cannot fix that. That's systemic abuse. That's systemic abuse. And then it's artificial scarcity that kills more than all wars combined. Really, artificial scarcity is the main driver for wars and violence and addiction and all that. You gotta, and it's even more sadistic when you consider we target 5% unemployment, keeping millions poor and unemployed, while our communities across America are crumbling, in need of work that's essential to the general welfare. Our communities are crumbling across America in need of work that's essential to the general welfare of society. And this work will not get done because there's no profit in it. Okay, but our government never needs profit. That's the whole deal. Article 1, Section 8 mandates that Congress mint and tax from thin air to provide for the general welfare and common defense thereof. So, why on earth, how does it promote the general welfare for our socially owned government to intentionally target and force millions to be unemployed and poor while our communities are crumbling across America in need of work that's essential to the general welfare of society? It would never be. That's artificial scarcity. That's untapped productive capacity. Our government can always maximize that productive capacity. It's the only one that can maximize that productive capacity because only our government is mandated to mint and tax for the general welfare. So government can always make dollars by law from thin air, to buy up all unemployment and balance our economy with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants it. This would maximize our productive capacity and rebuild our crumbling communities across America to raise everybody's standard of living without raising taxes, without making cuts. Okay, now we also got to understand that, again, when we target unemployment, this gives a buffer stock of unemployed to capital, which they use as a weapon in a class war on labor. I already talked about how. This is why our wages have been stagnant from the 70s, while corporate profits and our productivity and our cost of living are at record highs. It's because government's engaged in class warfare, wage suppression, targeting unemployment. That's what it does. So now parents must, work 2 full-time jobs and they still need the black market to make ends meet, and this leaves kids left alone, vulnerable to addiction and violence. And, crime goes up, disease goes up, all these things goes up. And remember, we privatize the public space, so there is no real social safety net. There's no real public educational services, after school services. There's no real health care, for the poor. And what little health care there is just people getting pumped full of toxic for-profit drugs like Adderall, which is basically cocaine. All this, teaches everyone to put profit over people in society. We end up with, tons of mass shootings, record addiction rates, record suicides. But thank God, Chris Como reminded me, our economy is great. Our economy is great. Never mind, we are in record private debt. We are in debt to our eyeballs, but never mind that. Think about that. Back under the New Deal policies, Americans didn't need credit cards for milk and eggs. They didn't need credit for education and health care. This is insanity, because we had a balanced economy under the New Deal. The majority of federal spending went to the bottom 90% of Americans. That balanced the economy. Now we privatize the public space, force everybody into private credit just to consume production and survive. and people wonder why, society's losing its humanity. And so here's the deal. We can accept the status quo. We can let our socially owned government abandon its mandate to the general welfare to instead work for the profits of the 1% at everybody else's expense. That's fascism. But we can let, government starve the economy of public spending, reducing deficits, targeting 5% unemployment so that capital could wage war on labor. And then that's our status quo. The resulting pay gap, like we have now, means that the majority have no disposable income to spend. So again, we are forced into tons of private credit just to consume production and survive. I'm talking about credit cards for milk and eggs, credit for school, credit for healthcare, a precarious existence to be sure. Okay. And the kicker in all this, because private credit always dries up, this leads to booms, busts, and bailouts, and government must always move back into a huge deficit position anyway to bail out the rich. It's socialism for the rich, guys. Rugged individualism for the rest of us. All right. This is artificial scarcity that kills more than guns and drugs combined. Yet we don't see no marches against artificial scarcity. In fact, the mainstream lies and scare tactics are designed to make us accept this economic terror and even defend it. Like Mr. Cuomo saying, we have a great economy. We have a great economy. That's because both sides, Democrats and Republicans, believe in trickle-down economics. They believe in voodoo economics. That's why they killed the full employment policies of the New Deal and have been targeting unemployment ever since. Okay? And again, targeting the middle like the Democrats like to do is still voodoo economics. It's still trickle down voodoo economics. And trickle down, the operational facts of trickle down is it leaves the bottom income distribution, which is the biggest segment of society. It leaves them the first to be fired in an economic downturn and the last to be hired in an economic uptick. So there is no recovery for the largest segment of society. We are in a permanent recession depression. We have huge wealth and pay gaps, huge inequality of wealth. So the majority wages stay stagnant while their production and cost of living are sky high. They're at record highs. This means the 99% has no disposable income to buy production and survive, leading to booms, busts, and bailouts. Government must move back into a huge deficit position anyway to bail out the rich. So this proves trickle down is just sadistic. It doesn't work. It's nonsense based in, ideological fantasy. We must make Congress balance the economy up front. Make Congress deficit spend enough up front, targeting true full employment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everybody who wants one. Then the economy would be balanced. Banks and private credit would become irrelevant. People wouldn't be dependent on private credit just to survive. Democrats must understand that the only way to balance a consumer-driven economy is to spend at the bottom so the consumers can actually consume. Okay, so to destroy trickle down, you got to, the logic of our operational reality says demand naturally travels up. It doesn't trickle down when we instead guarantee the jobs of the bottom income distribution because they make up the largest segment of society. The more dollars that they have, the more they guarantee and demand the jobs of the skilled and educated above them. It's simple logic. Demand travels up. It doesn't trickle down. When you give people at the bottom living wage jobs, they have money. They have immediate needs that need filled. And they will be filled by the skilled and educated above them now because they have money. So that's what promotes a healthy economy. That's what promotes productive economy, produces growth in the economy. Hell, you could give the rich all the money in the world, all the tax breaks in the world. Why on earth would they ever invest into their own business and expand if they can't sell their own production? Because the majority of Americans have no disposable income to buy their production. Because the majority of Americans, live in poverty. Half of Americans, 60% of Americans don't even have a savings account. One health emergency away from being homeless. One emergency period away from being homeless. They have no savings. They live a precarious existence. So, you don't get a balanced economy like this. You get, and then people have to fill that spending gap with private credit because that's the neoliberal way. Starve the economy of public spending to force us into private credit to consume production. And both parties have been doing this from the 70s. So we need to understand this stuff to defeat it. We need to all unite in solidarity for the public purpose so that we could force our government to buy up all unemployment, to make dollars at will from thin air by law to buy up all unemployment and maximize our productive capacity in a green, sustainable way that allows all to derive good benefit. This is how we restore hope on a systemic level. The federal job guarantee is a democratic means of production capable of increasing just about any production that we need for the general welfare of society. So this is how government can satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare. We could raise everybody's standard of living with things like single-payer health care, with things like child care, elderly care, things like green sustainable energy infrastructure. The list goes on and on and on. Fully staffed schools, after school programs. The list goes on and on and on. And we don't need to raise taxes or make cuts to do it. Again, things that are public goods that are essential to the general welfare, we don't have to charge the end user. Government never needs profit or even revenue to spend and operate. If government's paying doctors to administer health care, we don't need to charge the end user because that's a socially valuable good in its own right. It's essential to the general welfare in and of its own right. And government never needs profit to begin with or revenue to begin with. Government needs results. It's mandated to satisfy the general welfare, to promote domestic tranquility. Okay, so that's the thing. If we need top notch healthcare, top notch education, free for all, because sick, miserable populations that aren't educated and aren't smart can't produce all of our needs of tomorrow. That's government's job, the general welfare. We need green, sustainable energy today because we don't want to be depleting our natural resources. We don't want to poison ourselves in the process just for the profits of the 1%. Okay? Hell no. So we have to understand this logic so that we can interject and we can unite and we can collectively force our socially owned government to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare. Because once again, we the people have all the power collectively. Don't let them tell you we're powerless. Don't let them tell you the government is powerless and impotent. Okay, because they want you to believe that. That way you don't rise up. Don't let them tell you that. We, the people, have all the power. The ruling class never just gave us justice out of the kindness of their heart. We have always had to unite in solidarity collectively to force the issue. Okay, the ruling class didn't want to end slavery. They didn't want to give us the full employment policies of the New Deal. The ruling class, Nixon didn't want to give us the EPA. All right, the Civil Rights Act, all this stuff. This is where people power rose up and forced a corrupt ruling class to, do our bidding. Because without the majority working, there is no society to rule. The majority can simply stay home from work tomorrow and watch America grind to a halt, go back to work the very next day. So it's low risk, high reward. But having demonstrated our ability to organize and, shut shit down, we can then leverage that capability to get any demands met. And people say, well, why even say that? It'll never happen. Well, first of all, we say it because it's the operational fact. Okay. And if you don't understand the operational fact, you don't start from a foundation of truth, your end product is always going to be flawed. Your solution's always going to be wrong. So we have to understand, we the people have all the power collectively. The only reason we accept our fascist government is because we believe collectively the mainstream lies and scare tactics and myths and legends that keep us divided and fighting against each other. They keep us punching down and fighting for scraps against each other instead of uniting in solidarity for a seat at the kitchen table. When you learn the simple logic of our operational reality, those lies and scare tactics are destroyed with simple logic. And because of that, it unites all sides in solidarity for the public purpose, using just simple logic. And that's how we force change. That's how we affect real economic and social justice. So please, guys, join, follow Real Progressives on all the social media networks. Please donate your money if you have money. Donate your time if you have time. We need you. Change will only come when you get up and start doing what I'm doing and what everyone else is doing. We got to start educating. Like, this is the job of Real Progressives. It's our civic and moral duty. So now I'm going to open it up for comments and questions, please. I can't see the comments from the beginning of the stream. So if you got a specific topic you want to talk about, if you have a specific particularly egregious lie or scare tactic that you saw in the mainstream and you want to discuss, please keep putting it until I say it, because I can only see a couple at a time. Hi, Jenna. Million Man March on Washington. Absolutely. Okay, my mentee, Charles Lovett. What pisses me off when they take when they always want to copy the civil rights movement marching, but don't want to copy the economic boycott movement too. Exactly, Charles. I mean, they completely miss the fact that Martin Luther King, his big thing was the federal job guarantee because he was a real revolutionary. He understood the power of a democratic means of production. And too many in our society don't get that all problems in our society are actually rooted in economics, and they have their macroeconomic remedies. So we must focus on that, on economics, on our operational reality, because it touches every situation. Anything you tell me, any problem you tell me, I'll show you the macroeconomic roots. Go ahead, try me out. I don't care. So, is China monetarily sovereign? Is China monetarily sovereign? Yes, they are. They are a monetarily sovereign government, just like us. They have a floating sovereign currency, floating exchange rate, non-convertible. Um, they don't have the international reserve currency like we have, but they don't need it. They deficit spend hundreds of percent over, or they have a debt to GDP ratio of over 250%. And I think it was like 350%. Japan does the same thing. Japan's monetarily sovereign too. England, Canada, Australia, there's a Russia. These are all monetarily sovereign governments. Yeah. What else did you, what else about them do you want to know? How does a true federal job guarantee work? Nicholas Maslow, what's up, brother? Good question. Well, from what I see from the experts like, Dr. Stephanie Kelton and Pavlina Chernova, and even like people like Dr. Joe Firestone, they talk about a two-tier system, where you're going to have one part of the federal job guarantee being a big public works program, like dealing with big national infrastructure public works jobs, like high-speed rail or highways or big infrastructure things. And then you're going to have the local part of the federal job guarantee that's federally funded, locally administered. And that will mostly use the existing infrastructure of nonprofits in place today. And the experts like Pavlina Chernova and Stephanie Kelton, they'll talk about how you go into any community and you talk to the existing nonprofits on the ground there, and they know the needs of their community. The only thing that they are lacking is resources. So if a federal job guarantee was going to go ahead and provide the funds needed, these nonprofits would be immediately be able to utilize those funds and help their local communities. And again, the federal job guarantee is synonymous with direct democracy. Okay, it lets people vote with their feet. It gives you extreme mobility because you got a living wage job waiting for you anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country. So if your local government doesn't value the work that you think it should be valued, if they let infrastructure be crumbled, if they let cops terrorize the people, racially profile the people, you can simply get up and leave and go to a local government that really does care about their people. Go to San Francisco or Oregon or Washington State. You could do that knowing you got a federally guaranteed living wage job. And what that does at a substandard city, they lose their tax base and their ability to operate. And so, in essence, the federal job guarantee makes local governments and state governments work to keep their citizenry happy, or else they lose their tax base and their ability to operate. Because local and state governments are not they are revenue constrained. Local and state governments can't make their own dollars like our federal government. So again, they would have to work for their citizens, keeping them happy, or else their citizens would leave and they would lose their tax base and their ability to operate with it. So it restores democracy. It lets you vote with your feet. The other thing the federal job guarantee does at the structural level, it sets a floor, a price floor for labor. Okay, it makes it makes the minimum wage the federal living wage without even a mandate to the private sector. Government doesn't have to tell the private sector what to do. We don't even need a minimum wage law. If government implements a federally guaranteed living wage job program, then now the private sector is forced to beat the living wage and beat the working conditions of the job program, or they simply can't attract a labor workforce away from the job program to begin with. And so this revolutionizes the private sector without a mandate. The capital would have to truly value labor, or else they can't attract a labor workforce away from the federal job guarantee program. And again, the federal job guarantee even stops for-profit imperialism by ending the employer of last resort status for the military. Quite simply, it would destroy the military's ability to recruit poor people all over the place, because we wouldn't be the precarious class anymore. We would have living wage jobs. People like me would be able to stay home in my own community with a living wage job guaranteed, rebuilding my own community in green, sustainable ways. Without people to fight their for-profit wars, our government would be forced to abandon its goals of empire and be forced to truly defend our nation's sovereignty, truly defend our people's rights against all enemies, from foreign nations to our domestic capitalist class. Okay, that's how this works. Because if they don't do that, they won't be able to attract a labor workforce away from the federal job guarantee to go into the military, to be patriotic and go into the military. The only way they'd be able to do that is by truly defending our rights according to the Constitution. Okay, so this is the big thing. I always say the federal job guarantee is the revolutionary, progressive keystone program from which other programs will flow. All right, and this is how we raise everybody's standard of living. And again, we don't have to raise taxes or make cuts. If we have the real resources to meet the demand for any program, I don't care what it is, then we can always afford that program without making cuts, without taxing, without raising taxes. And that spending will always be non-inflationary. It's all about matching supply and demand. All right. Our government always has infinite spending capacity. It never needs revenue or profit to spend. Our government always has infinite spending capacity. The only thing that matters here is that our government makes the required investments into our society, into our productive capacity, to ensure that we have enough real resources produced and created and available for anyone to buy with any money. That's the whole point. So in other words, I say it like this: Social Security can't go broke. It's just a law. Okay, just like dollars themselves are just a law to satisfy tax. We can't run out of laws. So government can never go broke. Government can never run out of dollars. So Social Security can never run out of dollars. It's just a law. All right, government can, and even Alan Greenspan testifying to Congress under oath to notorious neoliberal Paul Ryan. Greenspan told him, we don't have to privatize Social Security to secure Social Security for future beneficiaries, because Social Security is not insecure. And government can always keep making money from thin air by law to pay all future Social Security beneficiaries. The only question is did our government make the required investments into our productive capacity in our society to make sure that we have enough real resources produced and available for any future Social Security benefits to buy? That's the deal. Money is no object. Literally, money is no object. It's a social construct. Okay, it's a means of production to drive real resources from us in the private sector to the public sector for the general welfare of society per the Constitution. This is how government satisfies its constitutional mandate to the general welfare, with real resources like a military or infrastructure or legal systems or sanitation, on and on and on. Okay? Hope that answers your question, Nicholas. I like that one. Thank you. Under oath, that's right. Never fall to the opposition. Absolutely, Jenna. Never fall to the opposition. We have all the power. Guaranteed benefits, state and local governments. Oh, I just missed it. Damn it. All right, I'm going to put up Mark and see what he's talking about. How can average people use what is described by MMT analysis of our currency and monetary system? Well, the main way we can do this, we can do with this information, is we can destroy the lies and the scare tactics used by the mainstream that was designed by the ruling class to keep us divided and fighting against each other. So when we hear someone punching down, for instance, talking about, poor people being lazy and they can go out and just get a job, or get a couple jobs, whatever, and work and get the American dream. We got to interject the simple logic of our operational reality. No, this isn't about personal responsibility. Our operational fact says our government targets 5% unemployment. Okay, so even if every single worker had the most job skills and the best job skills, the most motivation to work, we would still have millions unemployed and poor. And because of that buffer stock of unemployment, we would have millions more poor with starvation wages, because that allows capital to wage war on labor. And so, that's how we combat this bullshit, these, rationalizations and, scapegoating and scare tactics. This is how we do it. When they say we have a great economy right now, we say, I wonder how we have a great economy when we're in our eyeballs to private debt. Americans are at record private debt, even more private debt than we were right before the global financial crisis in 2008. So how does that translate into a good economy? Maybe good for the 1%, because they love it when our Congress starves the economy of public spending to force us into private credit just to consume production and survive. They love that because the private credit lets them make profit. All right, that's the neoliberal way. Privatize the public space, deregulate everything, starve our economy of public spending, to force us into copious amounts of private debt. Another one they say is, we can't just, put it on the credit card. We can't just put it on the credit card because, public debt, the national debt is somehow a burden on future generations. And people believe this, and so they accept artificial scarcity today. Pointless austerity today that kills just like bullets today, out of fear of non-existent inflation tomorrow. All right, so we got to combat that with the simple logic of our operational reality. All right, simple double entry bookkeeping, simple accounting identity. All right, it's scientific fact. The government's debt is our asset in the non-government. When the government spends more into the economy than it taxes out, that's recorded as a government deficit on its side of the ledger, on its side of the spreadsheet. Okay, so let's say government deficit's $10, negative $10. That means we in the economy have 10 net dollars, a surplus of 10 net dollars to save and do business amongst each other how we want. All right, the government's debt is our asset. In other words, every dollar the government spends is a liability of the government. It's promising to accept that dollar back to extinguish our tax obligations. So it's a liability of the government. That same dollar is our asset because we can extinguish our tax obligations with it. So really, all this is the national debt is just all the dollars in existence that haven't been taxed out yet. That's not a burden in any way on a monetarily sovereign nation like us. The only way our national debt can be a burden is if it's too small, because that means then there's governments starving the economy of public spending, and we have rampant unemployment, and we have work all over that needs done. We have untapped productive capacity, artificial scarcity. That's what that means. That's when it's a burden. The burden is never numbers on a clock in Times Square. Okay, that's just an accounting identity. The burden is the lack of investment our socially owned government makes into society, makes into our productive capacity to produce real resources. That's the real national debt. The national debt in reality is our national savings in the non-government. Those are our dollars in existence. Okay? So what else we got here? When it comes to for-profit imperialism, things like that, that's another one. That's another one where, government is subverting its duty to the general welfare to instead work for the 1% and the profits of the 1%. We go around, we team up with right-wing extremist groups all over the world and against left-wing socialist or communist movements, which is really just about protecting our for-profit way of life, capitalism, against communism, which at its root is not evil. It just means worker control. So America desperately wants to keep its for-profit way of life. It doesn't want to let democracy into the economy. And so as a result, we team up with all these right-wing extremist groups like the Taliban, the Contras, Karzai now in Afghanistan. We do all this crazy shit. And our for-profit imperialism, in so many ways, it blows back on the general welfare. First of all, it causes massive migrations throughout the world and massive, all the millions of refugees that upset, the natural order of things. These people don't want to leave their homes. Okay, they are forced to leave because of our for-profit imperialism, and then we want to terrorize them even more at the border. So, and then also when we get drugs in the economy, we look the other way when these right-wing groups that we are empowering have to traffic drugs to raise funds off the books because Congress ain't going to give a lot of these people money, because the people ain't going to do it. So, as a consequence, we end up flooding our own streets with illegal contraband, illegal drugs, as a result of our proxy wars against democracy in the workplace. And then we inflict even more draconian drug laws here in America. And we become fodder for the for-profit justice system in America. Now we're, slave labor for the prison industrial complex. Now we are targets for policing for profit. It all ties in. It's all about profit. Don't let them fool you. Don't let them trick you. Don't let them scare you. This is our job. This is our mission. Please, again, follow and join Real Progressives. Look up people like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Dr. Fidel Kaboub, Dr. Bill Mitchell, economists like Ellis Winningham, Warren Mosler, Pavlina Chernova, Mike Norman, people like, Stephen Hale. Look these people up. While you're at it, look up Gene Sharp. Look up Howard Zinn. Learn about civil disobedience, massive scale civil disobedience. Look up FDR's New Deal. Understand how we got the ruling class to give us that New Deal. Get educated. Each one, teach one. Change is only going to come from the bottom up, guys. Thanks for joining me. If I don't see anything else, I'm going to stop. I do want to do another quick live stream after this one to talk about the structural reality of the Federal Reserve, because that's a big scare tactic. I want to do it in under 10 minutes to get it down, just to completely destroy that scare tactic and conspiracy theory. So thanks a lot, guys. I don't see anything else. Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll do this real quick. Mark Fabian, knowing that federal solvency is never an issue, shouldn't we be demanding our representatives to justify not voting on bills for social benefits like HR 676. Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason they can't. Once the public understands the reality, there's no way a government can successfully get us to accept pointless austerity, pointless artificial scarcity. There's no way that they could get us to accept this right wing neoliberalism that privatizes the public space and deregulates everything, that starves our economy of public spending, that forces us into private credit. There's no way. Once we understand that government can make dollars at any time by law from thin air to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare and common defense thereof, we as a people will rise up. We will not accept pointless austerity today. We will not accept artificial scarcity today any longer. We will demand top-notch health care and education for all. We will demand green, sustainable energy for all. We will demand fully funded, fully staffed public education, nationalized education, kindergarten through college, free, because it's a public good that's essential in its own right. We have to learn the truth and demand justice. We need a new Green Deal. Okay, anybody that comes out, Bernie's coming out repping a real federally guaranteed living wage job program and a new deal. Anybody that reps that will get majority support in America. We will see people turn out like never before. You think Obama got first-time voters? It would be insane. And that's how you defeat a corrupt election system, by the way. Okay, as we saw with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was able to win her election, even though we know that the DNC primary process is corrupt. The DNC told us they choose. If they want to choose, they will choose. But they knew they couldn't choose in this race because, she had overwhelming support, nobody would have accepted anything else. They wouldn't have accepted any other outcome. Plus, it was on more of a smaller scale. So it would have been, they know that it would have caused more problems than it was worth. But the reality is it shows us that if we all unite in solidarity, we can force our candidate. We can make anybody in office. I don't care if it's Trump or anybody. We can force them to do our bidding. It doesn't matter how corrupt they are, how fascist they are. We got the power once we understand our operational reality, because then we don't believe their lies and scare tactics. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for your questions, for your participation. Thank you for your dedication to affecting real economic and social justice, because if you don't do it, who will? If we don't do it, who will? If not now, when? Like Steve Grumbine always says, and that's another guy I forgot to mention. I always need to mention this guy because it's because of him that we have this platform. It's because of him that I have this knowledge and the confidence to come out and teach it to other people and not give a shit what anyone says about me, what any troll says, what anyone does or says. Okay, I got the confidence because Steve Grumbine had the vision to create this grassroots organization known as Real Progressives. And we are like a family. We got each other's backs. I got people right now behind the scenes that are helping me share this, that are helping me promote it, that are talking to me and giving me tips and pointers and information. And, we help each other. We're there for each other. And that's what we need. We need an organization that shows us the true north for the progressive movement, for the 99%. That's Real Progressives, because we represent the bottom income distribution first and foremost, because that's the only way to balance a consumer-driven economy, and to do it in a sustainable green way that allows everybody the opportunity to derive good benefit. It allows everybody the opportunity at their birthright as guaranteed by the Constitution, the American dream. Thanks a lot, guys. Please share this. Take it easy. Tune in next for my short one about the Fed.